should see it like, are you in the creators dashboard?
Okay, wait.
So if you see at the top of your YouTube thing, you should see a little picture of a camera and a plus. It's in the top right corner.
Yes, yes.
So just click on that.
Yeah.
And then that takes you to the creators dashboard.
I only see two things there: upload live or go live.
Yeah, so click one of those, and then you might have to cancel a little bit later.
Okay. So I clicked upload live, and I can see, upload videos. I can see a link that says upload video.
Okay, so just cancel that.
Okay, wait, I can see this dashboard now. I can see the channel dashboard.
And then you see on the left side, there's something that says content.
Yes.
So click on content on the content tab.
Okay. Yeah.
And okay, so then you see then you should see like a thing with our event there.
Yeah, so under the live, there is one. So let me just click on that right now.
Yeah, if you click, it's going live, and basically there's a visibility. You see that visibility tab?
Yeah, so so the link is working. Yeah.
Okay. And you see the visibility tab?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that will allow you to make us go public. Now I found out I cannot do both Facebook and YouTube at the same time. So there will have to be a link to the YouTube channel from Facebook.
Link to the YouTube channel from Facebook. Okay.
Yeah, on our Facebook page, if you just put a link there, then that should direct people to the YouTube channel.
Could you put a link? And also, Aishwarya, could you make sure at some point, if you could share the Zoom link to this meeting to people who, if they want to come, we're not going to be over 100 people, right?
Yeah, no, we only have 55 people right now registered.
Okay, so I think it's fair to pop out the link, Aishwarya, at some point. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. The link
you have that. Yeah, it's a registration. Michael, make sure you put the registration link and not the Zoom link, because those are unique.
But can the Zoom link just pull you into this meeting automatically?
No, they'll have to click on the registration link, and then register. As soon as they register, they will get a link that allows them to join the meeting immediately.
Do you have that registration link?
I have it here. I have it here. Let me post it. Okay. Let me post it.
No, but what I'm saying, Michael, is this something you want me to post on the Facebook page, or is this something, where do you want me to?
I think it sounds like we're running this off of YouTube for what it's worth. And so what that means is that we're going to, if anybody comes to YouTube, we'll try to push them to YouTube via other social media like Twitter and whatever, and Facebook. And then if you see people on YouTube, then we could put in the comments, please register if you want to be part of the Zoom conversation for this. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that if anybody wants to come in to Zoom, they can.
Basically on Facebook, YouTube, you give a link to YouTube and to Zoom. And on YouTube, you give a link to the Zoom registration.
Okay. Yeah. So we're not doing the Facebook Live.
No, because I can only choose one. So I've chosen YouTube.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome.
So,
and
are we recording this?
Oh, I'm going to start recording this at some point. So yeah. What else?
Okay. So last question is, can you put a link to the YouTube thing in the chat, just so I can start putting it out on social in other ways?
Great. Aishwarya, could you share the YouTube link?
So this is, so I hope the link is exactly the same, whether it's private or public.
Why don't you share it after we go public then?
That sounds fine.
Okay.
Then we'll start banging it out in the background.
Okay. And I realized one last thing is, Michael, I'm going to make you the host again.
Okay. And then as far as breakout rooms, I'll just see how many people there are. We'll look for about 6 people per breakout room when we go for the discussions. Is that what we decided?
Yeah, that sounds good, right?
And then about maybe about 10-minute discussions, and then we'll come back together and we can have an informal talk. We can have breakout room. I mean, I can do that.
Well, okay. So I mean, what I thought is that we'll just go for an hour, and then after an hour, the formal event will end, and then we'll create the breakout rooms and people can hang out as they wish.
Okay, so you just want to go straight from and the informal would be you get to choose your breakout room, or I'll put you in a breakout room.
Exactly,
or do you want to
and just meet each other, discuss, process the whole event.
I can sort of explain how that would work, and then I can also run the placing people in different rooms if they want to go talk to somebody. So they'll just have to ask me. I want to go to anyway. I'll deal with that. So that's easy.
So yeah, so that's simple, right? Then we'll just do. And so by the way, special greetings to Shanta. Are you there? I'm sorry I didn't say hello before. Hello to Shanta and to Sachidanandan and EVR and Jay, and also Hemant from Poetry Wala is with us, and Aishwarya, and Bharat.
Mr. Narayan, I'm here.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for coming.
Jai Sheelan, Sachi.
Meeting you again.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Wonderful
so
to meet you. Yeah, Martha is there.
okay, so are we ready to meet the world?
As you decide, I mean, it's up to you.
Okay, okay. So
Vivek,
yeah.
just one more query, Vivek. So I'll be putting the public YouTube link on the Delhi Poetry Reading Collective page.
Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook page. And that will also be, that'll be a public sort of post, right?
That'll be a public post.
Okay.
But I guess do it after we go public just to be sure.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Okay.
But guys, if you can, Aishwarya, in the background, put it out on any other social you have, because nobody is going to follow that. There's only 18 people following that page right now. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, not a big deal.
I don't have.
Aishwarya, could you also post the YouTube link into our chat here, so that and then Michael can also share it on. Could you do it now also?
Yeah, one second.
Just go public. No one's watching.
No one's watching. Okay, then just go public.
Yeah. So one sec, wait, let me just do that.
Oh no, but it'll record. The whole thing will record. That's the only thing if we go public.
Okay. Well, okay.
Well, it's 7:31 anyway, so I guess we could.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's go
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we let everybody into the breakout? Everybody in?
Yes. There was just I think we're ready to go. Michael, can you do one thing? Can you also can you make me a co-host?
So sorry. Yeah, I'm going to do that right away. Sorry about that.
Because I want to be able to screen share and stuff like that.
Yep. You are co-host now.
Okay.
Okay, should I then?
I forgot to invite Sridhar Swami. Yeah,
okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Okay. So yes. So Aishwarya, you can go public, and then we can start letting people in.
Okay, I'm gonna let people in. Is
that
okay?
Okay. Are we ready to go? FJEVR. Okay. Are you ready to rock?
Hey, Bharat, will you keep an eye on the room too?
Yeah.
I'm admitting everybody now, but here we go.
Well, the link still appears as private, Vivek.
Okay. Okay. So then now just make it public and get
I'm
private.
doing that.
Okay.
I'm doing that, but it's not it's
live on YouTube.
Yeah, go live on YouTube. Maybe.
My screen says.
Yeah, go live on YouTube.
Yeah, that's what I've done that. But then the moment I open the link still appears on the other page as private. So.
On our screen, it is appearing as live on YouTube. Yeah.
Sorry?
No, on the screen, I can see live on YouTube.
Can you share the YouTube link in the chat so that we can someone else can try it?
One way.
Okay.
Can you check now?
Yeah, I'm checking. I might be logged in, but okay. So I can see us on YouTube. I can see us on YouTube on that link.
Okay, and that's okay. Can others too?
I can't. It says the video is private.
Yeah. So this is, I have
Yes.
converted.
Can everyone see the YouTube link in the chat?
I'm looking. Yeah.
I can see.
Live on YouTube, yes.
Live on YouTube, that's what we see. It doesn't say
No,
private.
It's private.
if you follow the link, the video is private, so it's unavailable.
Yeah.
So we're streaming,
No,
but the video's not the stream's not gone
no,
public yet.
it will be public now. It'll be public now.
Okay.
I think I heard what I was getting wrong. It'll be public now.
Yeah, now it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we start?
Yep.
Okay. Well, greetings everyone, and thank you so much for coming. As you know, we'll be asking you to mute your microphones, except when we go into discussion. And then you can ask questions, and of course you're welcome to use the chat. We're also live on YouTube. That should be showing up now. You can click on that. And those of you who are on YouTube, you can also click on the registration link to come join us. We have some spots here. Okay, so welcome. And let me just say, this is welcome. This is the, I suppose, first event of the Delhi Poetry Reading Collective. This is a group that grew out of there was a reading group in Delhi that was started some years ago, and that was meeting physically. And then, a few of us decided that we didn't just have to meet physically, we could also meet here. Many of us are writers, but, the idea was to really think about the agency and the power of the reader in poetry, the power of the reader to be able to select and also to be able to read creatively. And that's what we're trying to work out here. And we have a few different things. We have we might have an event like this, which is a large event, but we also try to meet about every other month to discuss 2 books of poetry, either contemporary or not contemporary, Indian or international. So if you are interested in hearing more about all of that, you can write to us. I'm just going to post some links here in the chat. So you can write to us to join our mailing list. You write to us at dpreadingcollective@gmail.com and just tell us a little bit about yourself. And then we also have another link there, which is a site where we're putting up poems for discussion. It's called delhipoeticswordpress.com. The second link is a link to something called Hypothesis, which will allow you to annotate the poems. And so we're trying to start a kind of set of close readings of poems through that annotation tool called Hypothesis. You'll be able to, if you see any highlighted items there, you'll be able to go in and annotate. So yeah, stay in touch and welcome again to the collected poems of Gopal Honnalgere. We're very happy to have here among us Shanta Honnalgere, who was Gopal Honnalgere's wife, and welcome, and also the editor of the collected poems, K.J. Seelan, and the person who wrote the afterword, E.V. Ramakrishnan. And so the way that we thought of doing this, the format goes something like this. We'll hear from E.V. Ramakrishnan and J.S. Seelan, and who will say a few words, but they have also selected a Honnalgere poem to present to you. So they will also read that poem, and we might have a little bit of discussion around those two poems. Gopal Honnalgere is a poet who I had to get used to. I had to teach myself to read, and so I think that I would highly recommend getting the book, which you have the link there on the Paperwell website. But we also thought it might be possible to just give the essence of him in just a few poems, and so hence the 5 poems we have on the site. So we'll have presentations from K.J. Seelan and E.V. Ramakrishnan, and then we'll talk for about an hour, and after an hour, the formal event will end. And that's when we will, for those of you who have to move on to other things, can do so. And we'll have breakout rooms so that you can all meet each other to think about poetry, think about Honnalgere, and process the event. So that's roughly the format for the event. So I'm going to start with the person who has written the afterword to the book, E.V. Ramakrishnan. And EVR, as we I guess one has gotten used to calling him. I first knew as really, an extraordinary and fascinating and very thoughtful poet. In my opinion, one of the most important Indian poets writing in English today. He was also an old friend long friend of Honnalgere's, as we'll hear. He's a bilingual writer. His last book was Tips for an Expanding Universe, also from Poetry Wala. And then there was Terms of Seeing in New and Selected Poems, and Python in Snake Park from 1994. Some of us still remember that book. And he has books of criticism, of translation, and edited volumes, many in English and in Malayalam. And he just recently retired as professor and dean from the Central University of Gujarat, which I think is great for us, because I think that means, that he must be writing a lot. So, so when you're ready, EVR, you can start. And if you want to read the poem, you can tell me, and I will share it on the screen when you're ready to read the poem.
I'm unmuting. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. So thank you, Vivek Narayan. We have many people to thank for this occasion. It's for some of us, the appearance of the collected poems of Gopal Honnalgere is an occasion to rejoice, to celebrate an unusual poet. Of course, he was so close to us, we almost took him for granted. And Gopal always was very clear about the worth of his poems. And maybe there's no point in going into the reasons for his non-inclusion in many of the major anthologies. He did not figure in any important anthology that came out during his lifetime, except for one which was edited by C.D. Narasimhaya. And CDN, as he was called, he liked Gopal very much. He even asked me to write an essay on him. Apart from that, he only figured in 60 Indian English poets edited by Jeet Thayil. And it was, the credit should go to Jeet for discovering and recovering the poetry of Gopal. And there are, of course, reasons why I won't go into that, but I would actually mention 3 or 4 things that very often we may not really remember. One is Gopal was a very well-read person. He read American, British, even Indian traditional poetry extensively. I remember in American Studies Research Center, we would be working on our research topic and discussing. And Gopal would be there almost throughout the day and reading poetry volume after poetry volume. And he always had lots of interesting things to tell on these poets, minor poets. When I was going through some of the old books recently, I find 5 or 6 books he has given me. Some are Xerox, some are original, saying you must read them. He kept on actually this habit of reading very closely, discovering new voices. And another thing we also should remember is around, I have mentioned it in my afterword, that when Arun Kolatkar wrote Jejuri, and there was a certain kind of shift in Indian English poetry, because Ezekiel and a whole group of modernist Indian English poets compulsively promoted the idea of the well-made poem, maybe the well-wrought un, we remember, and poems to be impersonal, poems to be, and there was a shift in the sensibility. And this actually coincided with a very important moment in Indian language poetry. So what we hear, there's a quality in Gopal's poetry, the spoken voice. The spoken voice becomes extremely important. And this is where it could be a very aphoristic kind of statement. It could be ironical. Sometimes it could actually suddenly become, it may be a poem. I'll be reading the poem I have chosen, but before that, just let me mention 1 or 2. It's a very simple poem, which actually you can't will. You can't will the sleep to come. You can only dream of it and prepare a bug-free foam bed in an air-conditioned room. Christ can't teach you how to say goodnight to your sleeplessness. But then suddenly the poem changes the tone in the second section when he starts saying you have to work hard. You have to work very hard for the simple happenings of your sleep, God, and atonement. I think from there the poem takes a different direction. In Gopal's poetry, there is always this transformation. Sometimes it could be a punchline, as in the poem The Donkeys, which describes how a Chinese legend and ends with a punchline. But sometimes it could actually come in the ironical detachment with which he actually distances himself from the experience. There is a poem called Hanumanji. You will actually find lots of twists and turns. And then suddenly the poem shifts to a reference to a calendar. The other day when I visited the Harikatha Bhagavata, I saw a calendar of Hanumanji carrying the mountain of Sanjeevani. And on the peak of the mountain, the picture showed a bottle of Dr. Baburao Patel's Shiva Shakti, a tonic of gods for vim, vigor, and vitality. 500 ml, rupees 5, 1000 ml for all your family members, rupees 750. I can hear the tone of Gopal in such sudden twist and sudden transformation of the voice. Perhaps one poem which has become iconic of Gopal's total temperament, worldview, vision, and even his way of articulating ideas is How to Tame a Pair of Chapels. I'm sure most of you must have heard of the poem, or you must read the poem. Let me come to the poem I have chosen, and maybe I will actually, Vivek, can you show it on the screen? Those who don't have a copy.
I actually had Hanumanji there on the screen, but I'm now going to scroll up. Just give me a second. I will scroll, or I should say I will crawl up to the top of the page here where I'm not sure why this is moving so slowly. Almost there.
Yeah, this is the poem.
I'll just get to the top of the poem here. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yeah, I can see that. I'm sure others can also see. Monsoon in Panchgani. For SNT. I don't know whether it's for Shanta or somebody else. He has a way of dedicating his poem to many. Monsoon in Panchgani. There's only one incessant rain, but we have names and dates with which we grow old, talking about yesterday's rain, which made our telephones dumb, and today's downpour, which marooned our city, spreading weather flu, and someone somewhere measures rainwater, drawing a graph which resembles our fever chart. Three ribs of my old umbrella, bent by the yesterday's pouring rain. Today I walk again down the valley, holding the umbrella at a particular angle against the downpour, hoping the rain itself would straighten the ribs. As I walk further down, my glasses get wet. I constantly wipe it with my half-wet hanky. I have contrived words. I should have been wiser to convert words to find a way instead into an energy and charge the heart or brain like a battery from where the words came perhaps, and use this energy to run two wipers, wiping my glasses clear somewhere. It's the old rascal, Kastura, singing an incessant melodious note, as if neither the rain nor my thinking can mar him. As I go still further down, O Kastura, teach me to get myself drenched and not to speak. Trees have roots to grow on hills. Creepers have tendrils to hold. Man of legs, hands, brain, and words, we should be born again in rainwater. I'm sure you must have felt a certain movement in the poem. What's so exciting for me about this poem, it doesn't end where it began. It moves. It actually has taken you along with its movement left you at a place where you did not begin. The idea, in fact, in many of these poems in Gopal, perhaps even I sometimes think how to tame a pair of these how-to kind of books are very common. We live in a certain kind of world where information perhaps actually packs everything. We are in a way totally surrounded, immersed in a barrage of unwanted details, and that's where I think in Gopal there is an attempt to unlearn, to go back. I need to know if you guys can hear me. I hope the sound actually is not coming from as a warning to me. I hope.
Just a reminder to everyone to please mute your microphones, because that is clearly somebody's, I think that's what that is. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Evia.
Yeah. See, unlearning is something which one has to cultivate. A certain kind of ignorance is something which helps you to understand. And that's what Gopal seems to suggest in the opening lines. There's only one incessant rain, but we have named. Okay, I will mute my mic. I'm sorry. This entire world of we actually inhabit, it has to name and also date, experience, and this process of man entering into a certain quantifiable kind of world. And that's why he perhaps actually says we measures rain. Then he actually talks about rainwater, drawing a graph which resembles our fever chart. Definitely, we find in newspapers, you see, this many inches of rain, this many centimeters of rain. So Gopal actually definitely has this kind of, there are lots of rain poems or where I remember there is one early poem, one of the earliest poems, but look at its argument. Like the lady in the purple. Thy will be done. This is the name of the poem. The lady has her hand on her mouth. I like you.
I'm really sorry. I feel like this, I don't know if this is someone who's actually present in the meeting.
Mike keeps taking my mic. I'm sorry.
Okay, who can we find out who is that?
So this is someone called Kaylee, I think.
Yeah, that is his body computer.
Okay, can we leave? Can we kick her out?
Kaylee's in the waiting room. Don't admit her, please. I don't know what's going on. So that's one solution to that.
Okay, great. Perfect.
The meeting host can mute all participants at once.
I've put Kaylee's in the waiting room. I'm not sure who Kaylee is.
Okay.
And I can remove her at some point, but don't let that back in. I think there's a sound problem. Okay, let's go ahead. Sorry about that. That's the first time that's happened.
Fine. That's okay. In one of the early poems, Gopal actually talks about it will rain on the trimmed bushes standing in the shape of tigers, peacocks, elephants, and lions in the park. It will rain and the bushes will become bushes. So this is an organic world where we actually impose shapes, we impose an order, we impose a certain kind of pattern. That, I think, is what Gopal is hinting at in the stanza which we actually just saw, the fever chart like rain chart. But then that's not the humanized rain that he is talking about. Toward the end, definitely he actually is talking about this transformative element in the world, actually, which perhaps we need to unlearn ourselves to recover. We need to actually, and this you will find a running theme in Gopal's poetry in one of the early poems.
How are you guys doing today?
There is an undiscovered self in each of us, like God, like devil, or like sex, a hydroelectric power station, perhaps one of the very powerful images in an early poem. So when we move in the poem, we actually, see Gopal now, this a mischievous child is very often the perceptive, a kind of gaze, the perceptive ability of a child to see connections, to see another world where the familiar world disappears. That actually operates in the middle part. You see, for example, he wants another rain to come and repair his umbrella. This is suddenly the child in Gopal taking over his experience. And as I walk further down, this is where the movement of the poem, as he actually walks down in the valley. Panchagani is a place where you have hills and valleys. He suddenly also remembers we are trapped in words. We are all the while trying to make sense of this world around us through helpless, hopeless words. And this element of distrusting and also not being able to come out of the trap of words, I think we have a wonderful stanza here. As I walk further down, my glasses get wet. I constantly wipe it with my half-wet hanky. I have contrived words. I should have been wiser to convert words to find a way instead into an energy and charge the heart or brain like a battery. Perhaps if Gopal had been walking with someone else, he would have definitely told him, see, I would like a pair of wipers on my glasses. This is a thought, very Gopal-like, very a mischievous child-like. These are in a poem like in this Osmanabad bus. You see, this narrative element and this conversational kind of tone, all that function in Gopal as part of a certain poetic, a part of an oral poetic, which actually takes us towards, you see, there is no obvious kind of poetic effect, but let's not assume that this is not something which actually came naturally. Gopal revises his poems. He has very often written 2 or 3 or even 5 versions of the same poem. So if the poem has attained this shape, it was after quite a few reworkings. And then you have a sudden, I feel the poem actually in a way becomes electrified with his address to Kastura. It's the old rascal, Kastura, singing an incessant melodious note as if neither the rain nor my thinking can mar him. I can't actually read these lines without a lump in my throat, because this is an attempt to move out of the realm of what he calls contrived words. The bird expresses itself completely without any medium, without any other. Its body and its voice and its meaning, everything actually is so completely articulated, and maybe the resonance of that Marathi word, even Kastura, it actually embodies a whole sense of breaking out of a very straitjacketed secular modern self, a middle class self, a self which is trapped in many kinds of verbal and visual, what you call habits. It's moving out of those habitual realms. This is what the poem actually, in his poems, Zen, or you will find lots of reference to Zen and its emphasis on void, emphasis on silence, emphasis on a certain kind of absence. I think nudist camp comes to my memory. That nakedness with a purpose soon becomes nudity. Like the life to which aims to know soon becomes a matter of sensation or a pastime with God or sex. So life which aims to know, you see, that is where Kastura gives us a dimension which is inaccessible in our kind of urbanized or quote unquote modern secular world, which tries to know. So somewhere it is the old rascal Kastura singing in an incessant melodious note, as if neither the rain nor my thinking can mar him. As I go still further down, O Kastura, teach me to get myself drenched and not to speak. See, suddenly the poem says, teach me not to speak. The contrived word, it's speech which actually perhaps finally becomes the impediment in reaching out or experiencing. All our experiences finally are trapped in the verbal, it's unable to break out of the shackles of the verbal world. And then comes the last few lines. Trees have roots to grow on hills. Creepers have tendrils to hold. Man of legs, hands, brain, and words. Again, see the reference to words. Man of legs, hands, brain, and words. We should be born again in rainwater. This being born again, perhaps in a domain where the verbal doesn't interfere, where we are actually, in a way, totally kept out of the corrupting influence of the verbal. And in Zen tree, Gopal actually says, truth is in space between your two thoughts. So there is a certain kind of gap between thoughts, which he is actually mentioning. So Monsoon Panchagani is, it in a way embodies a very characteristic kind of Gopal cosmology, I would say, his worldview, his way of, in a way, recreating. Gopal is very much at the center of the poem. And finally, he surrenders to the bird which speaks so emphatically without using words that suddenly we are made aware that it's something we need to learn ourselves. We need to be reborn again in rainwater. Perhaps your broken umbrella can help you better in this journey towards, as Gopal would say, the undiscovered self within you. He actually, all his poems, he has been looking for this undiscovered self. Is it the child? Is it the God? Is it the devil? Or he would actually, and occasionally in poems of this kind, you see, when he gets into a certain kind of relationship, I think Kastura actually becomes a mode of relating to several things at the same time, like the chapel in the other poem. Chapel it is from Mahatma Gandhi to Marx. A whole lot of things can be brought into the a simple, very rooted kind of an image. So I would like to stop here, Vivek, and I think I would very eagerly wait for Oliver to see discussions, and particularly Jay may have a lot of things to say. Thank you very much. Hope I haven't taken too much time.
Thank you, EVR. There was really so much that you said there, and so much you went to. But one of the things I thought was fascinating, that maybe ties a lot of it together, is that moment you said, that moment of coincidence between, well, is it a coincidence? But that shared moment at which Kolatkar's Jejuri comes out, and also similar sets of things, certain things are happening in poetry in the other Indian languages. And there's a synergy, and there's a move away towards the well-made poem into exploring, other kinds of tonalities. I thought that was fascinating, and of course, really connecting to everything, this idea of the relations that Honnalgere made, and I this is something to maybe come back. I want to now go to Jay, but it's something to come back. If we have time towards the end, is how is poetry built through relations and friendships and things like that. And I think that in his way, it seems like Honnalgere is one person who had a genius for these kinds of friendships, to be able to write these poems to different people, and to think about what that might mean about for sort of eking out a poetic community. But so much in that reading. But we really want to go to our next speaker, to whom we really owe this book. The editor of this volume, K.A. Jayasilan, who was a lifelong friend of Honnalgere's. Michael, maybe you can we switch to Jay now, just to have them on the screen.
Called R. Amritavalli there.
Yeah, we just want to. I want to be able to highlight. Just asking Michael.
Yeah, I'm looking. I'm trying to find the name among all the names.
Okay, it might be Amrit, R. Amritavalli, I think. Are you talking from Amrit's thing, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay, so look for R. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is to whom we really owe this act of recovery to, and a lifelong friend. And I think you didn't meet, although you also studied at Shantiniketan, you didn't meet Honnalgere there, but a couple of years later in Hyderabad. And I can't imagine what this must be like for you in terms of having known him, Jay, across this, known Honnalgere across this period of time, and now some years after his passing, to be launching his collected poems, which you have edited, which must be incredible. It's very interesting. So Jay is a reputed poet in Malayalam, and he published 4 books of poetry in Malayalam. And he's also a very important and noted linguist. And at the time of his retirement, he was a professor and chair of the School of Language Sciences at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. And I think done a very special thing in this book. I will leave it at that, so that the introduction doesn't go on too long. K. Jayasilan.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me first apologize for speaking under the name of my wife, Amritavalli. Okay. Okay, so Michael couldn't find me on the screen. Okay, now, as Vivek mentioned, learning to read Gopal Honnalgere is a very big act of learning, because this is a kind of poetry with its wandering structure and difference from all that we imagine a poem to be. As Vivek said, this idea of a well-wrought urn kind of poem. This is the antithesis of the well-wrought urn kind of poem. As I said in my introduction, this is a poetry which sets at naught a great deal of our ideas of what poetry should be. And therefore, to get into Honnalgere, you have to read him repeatedly and read him, because at first sight it looks like very random images and thoughts strung together. It looks as if it hasn't got coherence, but the coherence is that of the man. And it's a great coherence which is at the center of all his poetic oeuvre. He once told me that all his poems make one poem. Everything coheres around a certain basic set of ideas. And that's the kind of attention we have to have when reading Gopal's poetry. Now, what I'll do is I've chosen a poem, Two Crows, which we will be reading together. In a way, it is a typical Honnalgere poem because it has a very loose structure. That's the hallmark of his poetry. That is, these are poems that wander. As I said in my introduction, they travel. They start from one place and traverse many places and go to another place. And in that journey, it does extremely wonderful things. Okay, this poem of Crows, you will see that it's a poem in two parts. There could be two independent poems. In fact, they could have been written actually as independent poems, because the first part appeared in an earlier volume called the Nudist Camp, which was published in 1978 or so. And then Gopal added the second part and put them together, and the whole poem in its present shape was published in the fifth, which came out in 1980. Now, what can we say about this poem? The two parts seemingly have little connection at a first glance. And that is typical of the Honnalgere poem with its wandering course. But there is also a connection, if we look for it, something more than just the mention of crows. The poem begins with an account of a school for crow chicks, which is taught by a grandfather crow. It's a school for crows. This school has a problem because it also has some quail chicks who can't learn to caw. And the quail chicks fly away because they are given corporal punishment by the master because they can't call. They fly away like Vedic hymns flew away from the Brahmin's tongue at the dawn of English and British Raj. Now, here is the connection. After the quail chicks fly away, some crow chicks who remain in the school want to sing like quails. Now, they are the restless denizens of their native world, but they will also be misfits in the world they aspire to. Here is the connection, because in the second part of the poem is about the Tamil Brahmin community, which is lost between two worlds, which is trying to balance two worlds. That is the connection, but that connection is not entirely obvious on the surface. The second part, can you scroll down? Okay, yeah. The second part describes a Shraddha ceremony performed in a Tamil Brahmin family. Shraddha, for those who don't know the Indian customs, is a ceremony you perform for a dead ancestor. In fact, this the Brahmin family who performs the Shraddha, they are performing the Shraddha the first anniversary of the grandfather. And when you come right down to it, Shraddha is ancestor worship, which is the most primitive form of religion. Perhaps religion began as an ancestor worship. So here is a modern community which is still practicing the most primitive form of religion, ancestor worship. And in this Brahmin ceremony, what happens is that the living offer food to the dead person. And the dead person is supposed to come in the shape of a crow and receive the food. That's the assumption. Accept the food. But in the poem, which describes this particular ceremony, what happens is that for some reason, on this occasion, the crows refuse to cooperate. And this is a very Ashubha sign. Ashubha in Sanskrit means inauspicious. It's very inauspicious that the crows don't come. And so the family has to reconcile this by in terms of the constructs which it has, which the grandmother does very deftly. That's the story. Now, before I read the poem, let me tell you what is very peculiar about this poem. Of course, there is we can of course note that the whole poem is made by the ironical description of the Tamil Brahmin community, which is Gopal's community. The irony of the description. But while we may note this, which we will note when we actually go through the poem, what I want to say is that there is something daring and audacious about this narrative that Gopal presents in this poem. What is what is daring and this thing? What makes the poem so arrestingly original for me as a poem is the tone. Here, a bare narrative, albeit a very humorous narrative, of a family event is presented as belonging to the genre of poetry. Normally, non-metrical verse uh, tries to mark its difference from prose by using elevated language or elevated thoughts or metaphor. There is no such attempt here, not even remotely. A bare narrative is presented as belonging to the genre of poetry. Now that's the kind of daring or defiance that one sees when an original voice calls into question contemporary notions of what poetry is. In this respect, it can claim a kinship to what happened when we all know, who know literary history, what happened when Eliot presented his Prufrock poem in the literary world in the 1920s. That kind of defiance and daring, that is seen in this poem, in the very act of presenting this as poetry. So now I'll read the poem. Of crows. My grandpa used to say that this is the first section which describes the school of crows. My grandpa used to say, the old man among the crow tribe whose digestion was dull, whose eyesight was falling short, who spent very little time in hunting, ran a school on the outskirts of the city near a temple tank on an old banyan tree in the early hours of morning, in the true public school tradition, to teach the crow chicks how to caw in 24 different tones. In such a school, naturally, Grandpa said, the quail chicks who could never caw got the battering corporal punishment. But they soon learned to fly and flew away, like the nomad Aryans' Vedic hymns flew away from the Brahmin's tongue at the dawn of English and British Raj. But the story does not end here, Grandpa continued. Here and there, one or two crow chicks started believing that they too were quails and tried to sing like quails. They too created a Hindu metaphysics, but all in alienation. Okay. So that is the end of the first section, which talks about these crow chicks who want to sing like quails. Now comes the bare description, the narrative of the Shraddha ceremony. When Ramu uncle kept 4 yellow rice balls in the backyard and waited to see the old man's soul coming in a crow to eat them on Grandpa's first death anniversary, The crows, which used to trouble grandma so much every day, even sometimes entering her kitchen, did not turn up at all till 12 o'clock. Nowadays, Bangalore is full of mice and bandicoots, which are very nutritious. No crow is foolish enough to fill half its stomach with your Brahmin's polished rice, said one of my uncles who was a doctor. The crows did not turn up even at 3 o'clock. I said to Ramu uncle, your priest, oh, there is this wonderful description of this priest. Your priest is very proud. He has read the 4 tragedies of Shakespeare like 4 Vedas in his BA honors. He says nowadays nobody reads Shakespeare in original. Even the MA students read bazaar notes. He has even read Max Muller and the Golden Bough. He can talk so much and so well on the Upanishads. It seems he wanted to become a philosophy lecturer, but his father forced him to continue the family profession. But he's happy, he says. He can earn as a priest more than what a lecturer can. He can easily become a godman in America, but he is very much sentimentally attached to his wife and children. He speaks good English, but chants all the Vedic hymns with a strong English intonation. Why don't you ask him to bring a crow in a cage next time? It'll be fun to see Grandpa's soul in priest's crow in a priest's cage. Does it sound surrealistic? But if he brings, it will be a surrealistic ritual. Andre Breton's soul will come to see it. We joked, we laughed and talked. None of us felt hungry. We had a very heavy breakfast. The crows did not turn up even at 4 o'clock. Grandma could not bear to see her eldest son waiting. She said, Ramu, your father was a good man. I think he has attained moksha. His soul has become one with God. It does not return to see us. Go and have your food. We laughed and went to have our food. We knew very well that grandma did not love grandpa. That's the point.
Ah.
It's a this the way the grandmother resolves the inauspiciousness of the crows not coming by giving it this interpretation. That is typical of how we in India interpret away things we don't like. Okay, we are great masters at this, and that's how the poem ends. So it is a very typical poem of Gopal's, and yes, so let's have comments. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jay. Again, there was really, so much there in what you were reading, but one of the fascinating things, which is a sort of theme, was this idea of tone. What kind of tone is Honnalgere producing, and what is that? And it's strange because in each poem also there are these, as you mentioned, you showed us through these shifts of tone as well, and and this kind of wandering, this sort of, I suppose, childlike whimsy sometimes that seems to go with what is clearly a very well-read mind. I thought we could stop there for a second and see if anybody had any questions, anything they wanted to put up in the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself gently and let us know. While we're thinking of that, let me also say that if you want to, just remind you that I'm putting it in the chat. If you want to read those two poems we looked at, as well as some others, Hanumanji, which EVR made a reference to in his talk, you can find it at the site. While we're sort of thinking and processing questions, I wanted maybe, Jay, if you could talk, and also after you, maybe EVR as well, a bit about knowing the person, Honnalgere, and also, what it means, what it meant then to kind of establish a poetic conversation or a poetic community. How did those things come about, and what were the, how did this work or not work through the course of, and Honnalgere is an interesting example, because from 42 to not this moment, we can think about those attempts at establishing poetic conversations and friendships.
Yes. When I think back about Gopal, as Ramakrishnan also will attest, bear me out. When we think of Gopal, what we think of first is about his disarray. As the person was in constant disarray. His life was always in disarray. Okay? He was never a collected person, a person with any seeming clarity. It looked as if he was all the time in a state of flux. As I said in my, I narrated an incident in the introduction, how Gopal had this habit of chucking his socks under his cot. He had a cot, this old bamboo and coir cot. We were in the hostel. We all were given these cots, and he would just chuck his socks under the cot. And so when he had to go out again, he had to crawl under the cot and retrieve the socks. And in that process, he would get his trousers messed up, his hair messed up. Gopal was always in a state of, what should I say? He was not a neat person. And that shows through. It's a kind of, you want to say something? Yes. Yes, why don't you say that? That is, I don't know what to say. Yes. As we were talking about Gopal the other day, we were saying, what can you say about Gopal? Gopal was Gopal. He was so unique. Yeah, you had to know him to understand how this poetry came about, because this was a man who lived like he wrote, like his poetry had this transitions and sort of not well made quality about his poetry. And that is true about the man Gopal and his life. everything was unwell made.
I think he was the one person about him. The only thing I could say is that he was Gopal.
Yeah.
You know, Gopal was Gopal. He was very disjointed also as a person. Like, first of all, he was very tall. And his movements were very disjointed. He was like a marionette. At least my memory makes it like that. And you know, most people, when you ask somebody who was he, how did you know him, what kind of a person was he, then you say, oh, he studied at such and such a place, he had such and such a job, and stuff like that. Biodata. There's no possible biodata for Gopal. It's just that we knew him. That's all. That's all.
He was very strange. That is, he had a coppery complexion and reddish hair. And so Uma Shankar once asked him, how do you happen to have reddish hair? And Gopal told him, I have an Irish grandmother. This I thought was just Gopal spinning stories, okay? But recently I talked to Shanta, and Shanta said somebody has researched the family tree and has found that there is a German connection.
Or Irish.
Irish connection. An Irish connection. A grandmother who was Irish, and she bequeathed this red hair to some members. For example, Gopal had red hair. None of his siblings except another sister had red hair. So, but he never sort of gave us details of this Irish connection. So,
yeah, and you never knew what was fact and what was fiction.
Yes, another thing is about Gopal, you could never say what he was sort of imagining and what was real. Okay.
But you know, also, like, I should say that he was one of the most compassionate people.
Oh yes, he was
He was extremely compassionate as a person. He was also very strange because he was in this very sophisticated environment. You know, in those days, CIEC for Ramakrishna will know.
He hated it.
American Studies Research Center. You know, everybody with their convent educated, I being also convent educated, unfortunately, accents and so on, and perfect English. And Gopal never worried, right, Ramakrishna? I mean, he was. I still his voice rings in my ears, and it was always, his voice was not modulated, his manners were not modulated. He didn't fit into society, and he found civilized people very boring, I think.
Yeah, that is a theme that which runs through his poetry. That is this the city. For example, the poem "The City," which is a kind of angry poem against the sophistication of our city people, which he contrasts with the monkeys sitting in the trees and picking lice, and they're naked without any thought of sex. Yes, here is Shanta. Here.
That's great to see you, Shanta. Great. I would mention just a couple of things, Vivek. What Amar said and Jay also said, he was extremely generous and extremely kind. I could see, you see, wherever he worked, you see, the class 4 employees, the other kind of people, he was so friendly with them. He always had people helping him. Though he couldn't organize himself well, he always found friends. And you see, in Hyderabad, where he lived in not very comfortable kind of economic position, he had sisters. And he once told me, if I go and ask for money, she would give. But then she would give 2 hours lecture, which would actually put me off for 2 weeks. So he said, it's better to actually we'll manage this way. You see, it was true. he was perhaps in the family where almost all people were very successful. They were in corporate world, and we need to know they had actually made good progress in life. And Gopal was maybe the man who remained in the margins, and nobody would actually perhaps maybe now maybe a lot of family members will claim him as part of their. But when he lived, he couldn't actually. He never mentioned. I think Jay would also. He didn't mention the family at all. And whenever I tried, he would give evasive answers, and he would talk about his sister. She is so strict. She would give me so many lectures, and I am through with all that, he used to say. So poetry perhaps was the only thing that justified his life, and he was completely given to poetry. And perhaps I have had a lot of maverick or that kind of friends, but Gopal was so simple, so creative, and extremely engrossed in this world of his imagination. And no letter from Gopal was without a poem. I think he must have done it to many friends, and some must actually be lost. I am sure if some of the friends are still left with unpublished poems by Gopal.
Yeah, in fact, Ramakrishna, I don't know if you or anybody has this poem, Sour Curds. It was one of the. I hunted for it, I couldn't find it. The lines still
Nothing to chide it with.
But the passage of time.
You remember that one?
It's all sour. If anybody has it.
Shanta, I want to ask if Shanta Honnalgere wants to say anything, if you wish.
Please.
I'm just recollecting all the, the experiences of the days of Hyderabad and Panchgani by your time. Very good. Yeah, he was a selfless person. He never remembered his family. The minute he's in his books, only poetry, and that's all. That's why many times I was a bit angry also with him. He never remembered anything about family or children or anything. It's true. He's like a peacock or a koel.
Yes, sir. I think he an embarrassment because
you can't bind him to the family. He's like a free person, like poets.
Yeah.
That I think.
Yeah.
He was a good friend of mine. He was a very good friend of mine. Umashankar, Gopal and me, we three were together all the time in Hyderabad. We used to go for walks. And before marriage, 3 years after friendship, only we got married.
Yeah, we remember that.
Poets should not get married.
He was a very simple person.
My wife is giving me this advice. Poets should not get married.
Or at least be willing to be something other than poets
Thank you.
in married life. No, thank you very much. That's all. I mean, I'm interested in also, the sort of poetic relations that Honnalgere makes, because you say that so often that and of course, a full third of this, I think, is it a third or a quarter of this collected poems is poems that were sent to friends in letters. And of course, and we also know that he was he had a correspondence with Robert Lowell and with W.H. Auden, who wrote him a complimentary note on one of his early poems. And so and also there's a poet, Anna Sujata Mathai. I'm not sure if she's here, but she had talked about how he had seen her in an anthology and then showed up outside her house to say hello. And of course, he was in touch with Srinivas Rayaprol in Hyderabad. And so he was, I think, one of the few Indian poets who was already tuned into Rayaprol's existence and had gone and met him. And Honnalgere's books are among the few books written by Indian English poets in Rayaprol's library. So yeah, so I wanted to, and I mean, but of course I also hear from Shanta that having a genius for poetry and poetic friendships is not necessarily having a genius for marriage, perhaps. But it's and that those lines. Anybody? Oh, we had a question from Tuin Boal. Tuin, are you there? Do you want to ask your question out loud, if you don't mind, because it's a long question? Are you there? You'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, maybe let me read out. If Tuin is not there, let me read out his question. He says, it's in the chat. He says, Richard Hugo says that there are two aspects in the revelation of a poem. One is that of the intent of the narrator, and the other is the discovery. So the Crowd poem made me think of this aspect. How are these two things related? Is the second, that is the part about discovery, always related to the internal? I don't actually fully understand this question. Maybe someone can enlighten me, or perhaps Tuin would like to come in. I don't see him.
Might be.
I'm just asking Tuin to unmute. Perhaps he's still there. Anybody else want to say something?
I think that the question is probably about intention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I could gather from the question is, how does one reconcile the intention of the poet and the experience of reading? I don't know if I got to him right, but that's the sense I got. I'll just copy it again. Yeah.
So do you want to say anything about that? I mean, how did Honnalgere imagine people reading his poems? I mean, what was his?
I don't. Can you say anything? That is what.
How did he expect to be read?
Yeah.
My own feeling is he never discussed his poems at length, but he was interested in, the kind of choice of words. Occasionally, we used to discuss, how certain lines, craft was, I think, though it may be absent, we should not actually assume that Gopal was not a craftsman in his poems. I think there is a conscious concealment of his, what looks disorganized, what looks. This was this also actually, he used to like William Carlo Williams and many other. There are out of the way kind of poets. And he will read them loudly, and we have had many such occasions. So reading loudly, I think, matters when you read Gopal, because as Jay also showed, the tone actually comes through, and there are twists and turns. Suddenly the poem takes a different direction, goes in a totally different direction. All these become, they come alive when you read it loudly. So I wouldn't actually say, when you talk of poetic intention, Gopal's poems took their own time to, I think, they must have germinated over a period of time. And let us also, you say, take what Jay actually said earlier, all his poems make one long poem. So there are certain basic kind of thematic or you say other kind of, this may be true of many poets. He keeps repeating and refining, you see, these concerns. For example, a word like God, I can't see a poet in Indian English who has used the word God so many times in his entire, poetic corpus. I can see someone, I am sure Sachidanandan is very much with us. Sachidanandan is one poet who has used Christ and Buddha and Gandhi repeatedly and in his poetry. And I would say Gopal is another poet whose constant evocation of Christ, Buddha, it actually, they are not simple words. They actually collect lot of associations. They go in lots of directions. So I think that's how Gopal moved. As he moved, the poems became more complex. One of the unpublished poems, which Vivek also had singled out for praise about, look at the way he has used the Upanishad kind of discourse. And that's a very complex poem. I think that complexity sums up Gopal as he evolved, over a period of time. So here was a poet who was not critically looking at his poetic self, but as we have been trying to say, as his relationship with the world outside, and one poem I think which he dedicates to Raiparol, or maybe where he says below is the earthworm, the image
I'm
of
just
the
I'm just going to pull up that poem, if you don't mind, so that people can look at it, which was a poem from his
Two Faces of Passion.
Okay.
Two Faces of Passion. See, look at this wonderful poem. Beneath my feet, an earthworm, moving from nowhere to nowhere, eating its way through the soil. And above my head, certain very tiny blood-red colored migratory birds, whose name I can't remember, each weighing about 25 grams, taking a non-stop flight of 3,000 miles and arriving at the destination weighing only 13 grams. You may say it's a foul poem, or it may, but this actually sums up a dimension of Gopal. You see, there is a bare human being. Can we talk of a certain kind of bare human world? Gopal was actually, in a way, bearing himself, disrobing his self, all association. And there is the poetic of Gopal. I think a kind of poetic of where I mean the idea of nudity or the idea of bareness, the minimal, a lot of such things. It's not accumulative, it's not acquisitive, it's not, the simplicity becomes much more a quality of his poetic as he moves. And that simplicity actually is, it's one with the verbal articulation, the vision, the tone, a whole is a set of what we associate with verbal is a composition. So maybe this poem sums up a segment of Gopal very, very convincingly.
Just that on that point of craft, just to remind ourselves again that Honnalgere's appears to really quite obsessively be revising his poems. And in fact, he revises them after publication, which means that they continue to trouble him after publication. And so he goes back and so he's, but what seems strange, I mean, in his first book, for Writers Workshop, there you see a kind of a nascent mind, but you see someone who is making clearer statements, still kind of a little quite all over the place in terms of influence, but making clear statements. And he moves away from those clearer statements. So sometimes you could say that, in fact, that I wonder if often when he is revising a poem, he's actually revising it to disturb it further, to unsettle it further into some sort of direction, rather than to move it in the direction of something that is very clear about, or very completely coherent about what it's saying.
Very true.
I want to ask, do we have any other from the chat? Oh, okay. So I have a question from Dion here. Dion D'Souza says, did the fact that his work was neglected in his lifetime bother him, or, and this is a crucial question, do you think it stymied his work anywhere? That so often questioned, like this lack of recognition sometimes stymie a poet's work.
Vivek, I just wanted to remind you that there are 2 hands raised as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we can go through this question and then maybe the 2 hands raised.
I feel Jay may have his, you see, he was bothered in the sense he wanted to bring out a collected poem, you see, collected poems volume, and he even had a big idea of, you see, collecting money for that. A big, you see, pamphlet was distributed, and so, but he wouldn't openly discuss that, you see, and he would never name, blame, you see, anyone for and that's why at the beginning I said he was more or less convinced of the worth of what he was doing, and perhaps he was clear what he did. He had invested fully in whatever he wrote. So the idea of you see, recognition as something larger than, you see, maybe he was reconciled to that. You see, when he could write well, when we wanted to, I think with the poem, you see, addressing Deva, a letter to Deva Patnaik, I think he also recognized that now poetry is coming to him, and there is a certain you see, stature in the way of writing. He knew, he was critical and wise enough to know these are articulations which have an inherent value. And I think that perhaps the reason why I have found him much more confident in the later years. Of course, I don't know, Jay may have his estimate, but that's what I actually have noticed.
Yes, he was, I guess, bothered by the non-recognition. Who wouldn't be? At the same time, he was a person who couldn't compromise. That is, none of the things which poets do to sort of push themselves forward. He never did that. Unless he respected somebody, he wouldn't make up to him. For example, C.D. Narasimhaya, he respected. And he went and had residence at Dhvanyalok for a month, or I don't know how many, and revised his poems. And that was a respect which was mutual. C.D. Narasimhaya also later respected Gopal, and he told him, compared to your poetry, your poems, much of the Indian English writing which is now praised is trivial. That's what C.D. Narasimha said. So C.D. Narasimha understood the value of this man's poetry, but he got that kind of recognition only very rarely. And he got it from a few friends whom he trusted and sent poems to. And, uh, and I suppose towards the end of his life, he was reconciled to the fact that if he is recognized at all, it will be after his passing. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Can we go to those raised hands? I can't see them, so yeah.
Miss Aparna Raiprol, please, why don't you
Yes.
ask your question?
Very nice. Thank you.
Aishwarya, thank you, Vivek. It's such a wonderful thing that you have organized. And Professor Jayashilan, I think my father, Srinivas Raiprol, also went to Dhwanyaloka, and that was one connection that Gopal Honnalgere and he had, and they were talking about. And I was very young, but I do remember him visiting home, and they're talking for hours together about poetry, probably each other's poetry. And there was that respect that they shared for each other. And I think that is something that comes across in the writings as well. And I think Arvind Mehrotra also mentioned that. Graziano was discussing that with me when he was here. So there are these kinds of connections with these lesser known poets. And I think both of them probably appeared in 60 Indian poets, as many others. So that was another kind of awakening. Probably Honnalgere was still alive when that collection was being prepared. He also wrote a very nice condolence note when my father passed away to my mother. Sorry I couldn't find it, but I think we were all quite moved by that note as well. So thank you.
But no, I think that's very interesting also how, Honnalgere recognized your father's work, Srinivas Rayaprol's work, which up to that point had, I think this must have been after the Writers' Workshop volume. So he had found that book, and he was, I'm curious about, the reception of Bones and Distances, if you remember anything, and how it is that Honnalgere finds your father's work.
Yeah, Bones and Distances was the first book, and I was barely 4 years old, I think, at that time. So that is one of the downsides. But I think what everyone says is the most brilliant poetry came in Bones and Distances. So I'm sorry I can't add much more than that. But definitely there was a lot of the volumes that came out now. The Angular Desire with everything else. I think you know that very well, Vivek, and I think Graziano's here. And Gopal Honnalgere's volume itself, there are some kind of similarities between the two, the kind of angst and not wanting to make connect or see eye to eye with the rest of the world, that lonely poet syndrome. There are many things that probably go together over there.
That's what I was thinking, that Bones and Distances, I think, really came out when Honnalgere was first making himself as a poet. And if you see that the two faces of passion, Graziano very interestingly pointed out the title is Two Faces of Passion, which is a concern of Rayaprol's as well. And like Rayaprol, what he does is he is approaching the question of desire in a kind of oblique way. So I mean, someone does kind of wonder if that would have been an important book for Honnalgere, and also something that perhaps influenced his style, which he then acknowledges in the poem to Rayaprol in Zen Tree and the Wild Innocence. Sorry, there were a couple of other hands.
Michael has a question. Michael Clayton.
Yeah, so my question is pretty much answered. I think it's pretty clear he wanted to be read. And, you know, I think that it's important for us to, I'm going to lower my hand. It's important for us to remember that he can be read now, right? You can buy this book and it's extraordinary. I confess I didn't finish it. I intended to. I only got through probably to 180 out of maybe 200, and I'm going to keep reading it. It's really a remarkable book. And it does like this, like it's true. Like when you read it, you see like he's doing interesting stuff all through the book and coming back to the same kind of things. It's probably a book you want to read twice. Poetry Walla is selling it, and so I think we should definitely, you know, try to buy it because it's available now. Anyway, so like I said, I was going to ask a question about sort of related to this question about how did he feel about being read. I think it's very clear that he wanted to be read and he looked for an audience, but that, I mean, based on what the you know, introduction and the afterword in this book, that seems clear, but also from the writing. He wasn't like, he clearly was writing to be read. So like I said, buy it. Also, Poetry Walla has lots of good titles. I just ordered this book along with Adil Jishwala's Shorelines, which is great. And it's not super hard to figure out the website. I mean, I'm not very good at that. It took me a long time because I'm not very good at online buying stuff. And I kept going to bookstores over and over again and they didn't have it. So like, yeah, buy it from their website if you can. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Bharat has a question.
Yeah, Bharat.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, like, Honnalgere spent several years in Hyderabad, but when I read the collection, I didn't really find the city figuring in any significant way in the poem. So did the city influence the poems at all? What did he make of Hyderabad? What did he think of the city?
He was a frequent visitor of certain institutions like the American Studies Research Center. EVR will tell you that. And he knew the city of Hyderabad extremely well. In a way, only Gopal could know it. That is, it is like, you know, there is a story of the painter Raphael spending his time with the beggars in the street who slept on the bridges. When his friends objected, he said, "I'm looking for faces," because the most remarkable faces you will find among the destitute, in the gutters, the streets. So he was, the Gopal had the same spirit. He was looking for people with no kind of covering of sophistication, and that he found among the rickshawalas. He was a great, as Ramakrishnan said, he was a great friend of rickshawalas and all kinds of people. And he knew the city, the bylanes of the city extremely well. That's how, for example, I made use of his knowledge to find a venue for my wedding, as I wrote in the introduction. He knew the city in a way which I didn't know, and maybe Ramakrishnan didn't know. He was a great wanderer inside by small lanes, and he made great friends with completely unpretentious, ordinary people. That was his focus. Ordinary people. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, you know, the last poem we have up there on the website, the National Highway, you know, it begins one way, but eventually what it does is it follows this truck driver into this tribal community where, you know, he's sake of he's procuring prostitution. And that seemed, the details in that seemed like, so dark, so disturbing, so right. But it seemed like something that really came out of a kind of an intimate conversation with a truck driver. I mean, that's the only way that you could, I don't know. I mean, you could make it up, I suppose, but it's given in a certain detail where the truck driver walks, he accidentally hits a goat, and then later the truck driver walks into the community, holding, I think that there's a bit of alcohol, there's a bottle of beer, a film magazine, and a condom. Those three things in his hand, and he's
with a lungi, a condom, and some film magazine.
So that sounds like a detail that could have really. Sorry.
Yeah, he knows the routine.
That sounds like something that could really have only come out from a conversation with a truck driver. I mean, to know that it would be those three things. So, we have, I think, maybe now we are actually over time. We are into an hour and 45 minutes, and it has been really fascinating. But I thought now we could end the formal event and we can move. I don't know how many people we have left, Michael.
We have 32 people left, 31. Okay. And so here's what, do you want me to suggest?
Yeah. Just basically we can have breakout rooms which people can choose, and then we just hang out. And those who want to leave and can leave, etc., etc.
Okay. So here's what I'm suggesting, that I'm going to put this in the chat, because for people new to Zoom, it may be a little confusing. Here are your choices. If you want to stay in the main room, which is where you are right now, and you can talk to a larger group of people and maybe have this conversation, more of these question and answers. If you have an updated version of, I'm going to open up breakout rooms and let you choose what breakout rooms that you want to go to. Now, you could talk to a friend here that you haven't seen in a while, and you might talk to them, get them by saying, hey, in the private chat, you can chat them, say, hey, could you meet me in breakout room 13? I haven't seen you in a long time. And so that's one option. If you don't see breakout rooms, that means you don't have updated Zoom, and that's okay. Don't worry. What I'll do is I will, you will ask me either in chat or out loud, and I will move you to a breakout room. I will also make you a co-host as long as you promise to be polite. And that way, once you go to that breakout room, which you'll get a notification about, you'll be able to move on the back side and come back to the main room. So that's kind of the plan. I would love to stick around and talk for a little while longer. And I'm sure a lot of other people might as well. So what I'll do is I'll open up those rooms, and I'm just going to let you choose. And I'm going to open up, 24 rooms. We're not going to use all those rooms, but if you want to go hang out and talk to yourself, you could go to a breakout room and do that too. So anyway, the point is,
you can see when you choose a breakout room, which will give you an option, you can see who is in that room. So because we decided not to go with specific themes for rooms or anything like that.
Yeah. So it's just a brand. So if you want to meet somebody, you can chat with them and say, hey, meet me in breakout room 13, if you feel lucky. And then they'll go, or else you can ask me, can you put me in that room? Okay. It's pretty simple. And you could stay around for bigger conversations as well. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to thank, especially also Shanta Honnalgere and Aparna Rayaprol for being here, for coming. And of course, to JK, Jayasilan, and to EVR for, some fascinating, introductions to the work of Honnalgere. Let's hang out for a bit, and if you want to leave, thank you so much for coming, and keep in touch. Remember, if you want to be, I'm just going to do that. If you want to be on our mailing list or whatever, just you can write to DP Reading. I'm just putting it in the chat. TP Reading Collective at gmail.com as we try to figure out, what this is. So, cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shanta. It was nice to hear from you, and I'm really glad that you're here.
Yeah, it was great meeting Shanta virtually. It was great, really. Yeah, it was. So see you, Jay. See you.
Okay, you're off, EVR. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So
bye.
we'll meet later.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime. So,
sure.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And Jay and Amrit, thank you so much for those for that.
We will come later. Yeah.
How have you all been?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
I mean, I what we could even do now, we have a few of us in here, everybody could introduce themselves. You're all good people to know each other. So if anybody wants to do that. So, yeah. How are you doing, Sachida?
Yeah. Where is he? I can't find him. Has he left?
Yeah, I have read through the book now, and I felt like translating 2 or 3 of them because, as I said at the very beginning, I could easily identify, with some of his modes of thinking and feeling, and the way he structured or unstructured his poems. That's why I felt like attempting a translation of 2 or 3 of his pieces to begin with, and maybe I'll do more. Maybe I'll have a whole book of Gopal in Malayalam. So I did 3, which includes, the Monsoon in Panchgani, and also the Hanumanji poem and the poem for Raipur. So this was a way of establishing a kind of very intimate connection with Gopal's poetry. I mean, understanding him a little better, understanding the way his mind worked and the way his words moved and the way the poem structured itself. So because I have always found translation to be a very, very intimate way of reading something more than, I'm not so much interested in the product of the translation than the process, which because you get completely involved in a poem, the way the mind of the poet must have worked, the way he must have groped his way and found his way through the language, and the way suddenly associations and various kinds of memories, all these gelled together to create the poem, and especially the unexpectedness of certain lines, certain images, certain things that burst into the poem without the poet sometimes even thinking about it, without his knowing it. So I found that happening a lot in Gopal's poetry. Something unplanned. Yes, at least it looks unplanned. Maybe he had some plan, but always he also was a deep planning, if I could use the word. If he had a plan at all, no, he wanted to move away from that plan. He wanted to. He was always ready for surprises, and he was. And so I think that's what made him a lot different from many poets. Because I don't want to name anybody, but I don't find so many surprises in many of the poets around me, either in the languages or in English. But he could always surprise you, and he could surprise himself, and that's why he could also surprise you. Because when an association came, and when Hanumanji suddenly turns into a calendar, and then it becomes an advertisement for a pill or a medicine, or so that kind of being open to diverse experiences, being open to the unexpected things bursting into your poetry. Because generally poets try to keep off those things, and to focus on the passage where they already are. But here is somebody who would who would love deviation. You know, somebody said about his knowledge about the bylanes of Hyderabad. I think it was Jayashilan who said that. So yes, I think he would love the bylanes of poetry also, and that's why you never found him, you know, on the highway of poetry along which most of the Indian English poets at that particular time walked. Even though now perhaps maybe more poets are trying to choose their own little bylanes. So I think that's what made him a lot different from the other poets of the generation. This kind of an attempt to walk along the bylines, to be the readiness to be surprised, the openness to the unexpected, and that's what I found in almost all his poems from the very beginning. And as he matures, you know, that the quality of the surprise also goes up. It is not that the surprise is always there, but the surprises also somehow, you know, turn into oblique meditations on existence in some way. I mean, it might look very sophisticated if I use the word, but actually they become meditations. You know, all his juxtapositions, which look so casual, ultimately also yield some kind of a perception into the very act of existence, and that also has intrigued me a lot. I mean, I have read whatever I could lay my hands on earlier of his poetry, but now that I have all of them together and reading all of them together again was such a pleasure and such a discovery. And I should thank all of you for bringing all these poems together.
Can I jump in?
Would you read us a poem from the Malayalam translation?
One second.
I don't know.
Sorry, Michael has a word.
Yeah, please.
Well, hey, Satyanandan, it's so great to see you. I'm just so happy to see you. I wish we could see you. I mean, I can't tell you.
Quite some time because I don't go out except to my daughter's place at times, you know. So,
you know, and I see Savita's here as well. Listen, I think that this is super great. Here's what I want to say. I'm going to stop the YouTube stream now. And the reason I'm doing that, I kept it on while you were talking because I thought that was a great reaction to the poem. And I think that's wonderful. But I'm stopping it, and we can stop the recording probably now, because if people want to be part of these events, it would be great for them to know that more things come after the event. Like we're actually trying to have a real conversations about poetry. And so that's why I'm stopping the stream. And everything that happens after this, if you're on YouTube, you just kind of missed it because you didn't come to Zoom or you didn't come to wherever we are.
So if you're on YouTube, they can join the Zoom now, right?
They could join the Zoom,
okay.
right?
We had